questions we ask, you can choose to answer them or not. That's entirely up to yourself.
I understand.
This evil man, or should I say monster, is Reynhard Sinaga. Between 2015 to 2017, he raped and assaulted at least 206 men in central Manchester. And his story is one of the most bizarre ever heard, and just a few minutes in, he says this.
He touched me, and I thought, I know some guys, they look straight but they're gays, or they might be one to be curious.
You see, Sinaga agrees to tell his side of the story. First, he tells detectives that the nice guy he met with wanted to come over to his house. And second, they both agreed to whatever they did that night.
You've not told me the truth, and this video will undermine everything that you've told me today.
So, can I see that?
Do you remember taking this footage? Yeah?
He was awake. He was awake that time. So now he's changed his position.
He's not changed his position. You've changed the position by doing what you're doing to him.
No, he moved.
You turned him.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
He was awake. I'm 100% sure.
You'll notice he's pretty comfortable and calm telling this story, and seems like the victim on the outside. And the more I learned about this horrifying case, the more I realized that's kind of his whole persona. You see, if there was one word I could use to describe Sinaga, it's a dark manipulator.
Because you don't believe me.
I don't believe you, Reynhard, no. I don't believe that he was awake at that stage.
He was awake.
He likes people sympathizing with him in order for him to have his way, but in the actual sense, he is a depraved monster. In fact, many people theorize that the only victim who managed to escape Sinaga's ploy with his consciousness realized this very personality trait and used it to conquer him until he could escape. However, in the early mornings of June 2nd, 2017, the Greater Manchester Police Department received one of the most horrific calls. The caller seemed confused, not knowing what had happened to him.
Police emergency.
I had an enjoying night last night, and I think some guy shot me to his house I didn't want to see. He shot me in his house most of the night. Then he raped me. He said attempted to rape me.
Where are you now?
I'm inside my house.
The caller, however, turned out to be an 18-year-old guy, who in a twist of event, had just been raped, or so he thought, and the place was at Princess Flat, close to Montana. About 2 hours later, however, when the police arrived at the location in Manchester, UK, what they saw was even more shocking and twisted. They were met with an unconscious man in a pool of his own blood, with suspected facial fractures, and a house in disarray. The monster was Reynhard Sinaga. This was indeed confusing to the detectives. They had expected to walk into the house to arrest the offender, but what they saw left them stunned. Bewildered, and not having a clear understanding of what had transpired, detectives decided to first save a life, and then get all the necessary information at the later end.
So when officers came in that morning, they found the occupant of the flat barely conscious, in a pool of blood, with suspected facial fractures.
Unlike many other victims, Sinaga kept on asking for his phone. If he keeps asking for his phone while in excruciating pain, then there must be something creeping about the phone, and the officers were in for a surprise. One of the detectives, Matt Gregory, went back to Sinaga's house to get the phone. He had told them the phone was under his bed. When Officer Matt got there, he took the phone and headed back to the hospital. While at the hospital, Officer Matt asked Sinaga for the phone's PIN, but all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, Sinaga attempted to grab the phone away from the officer's hand. This, however, sent a disturbing message to the detective, who instantly knew something was off. It was a critical moment, with tension, as Officer Matt stood on the brink of a breakthrough. Every second felt like an eternity. His mind raced, but he knew he had to act swiftly and shrewdly. Sinaga's phone was the key, and Matt had one chance to crack its code. Drawing on his instincts and years of experience, Matt approached Sinaga, his eyes never leaving the suspect's face. He employed every trick in the book, every psychological tactic he had mastered, to extract the PIN from Sinaga. Finally, Sinaga relented, revealing the PIN. Matt's heart pounded as he punched in the numbers, his fingers trembling slightly. He took a deep breath and began to scroll through, knowing that within this device lay the secrets that could unravel everything. But the young man on the bed doesn't give up on his attempts to take the phone away from the detective's hand, and those attempts would prove futile because Officer Matt would finally discover Sinaga's deepest and most disturbing secret. Officer Matt found something that would pull them all out of the mystery they were in, and also of an evidential value. He found the pictures and videos of males sexually assaulted. This was not one of those usual assaults. Some went on for 8 hours straight while the victims were still unconscious. Officer Matt, however, watched closely and found out it was the very same house he had been to the previous day to pick up the phone. He watched how teenage young guys were bent over their knees with their trousers pulled off slightly and assaulted brutally, but when he looked closely at the perpetrator of this evil, it dawned on the officer it was the very same man in front of him, lying on the bed, Reynhard Sinaga. Eventually, detectives finally understood that the person who had called earlier was the victim, and the one in front of them was the offender, completely believing the story of the caller.
This is Reynhard Sinaga, as he wanted the world to see him.
Sinaga, a 36-year-old postgraduate student, originally from Indonesia, decided to remain in Manchester. While in Manchester, Sinaga lived openly as a gay man, living not far from Manchester's gay village, and he is said to have had many boyfriends. But that was only a mask covering his true identity. In the actual sense, his ordeal was to approach intoxicated young men in central Manchester and lure them back to his strategically located flat, which was near a popular nightclub area, Montana House. An even more terrifying truth is the fact that he not only takes them to his house but spikes defenseless victims with sedatives, probably a GHB-laced shot, to render them unconscious, then films himself raping them, and in many cases repeatedly for hours on end.
I am a student. I study geography. So your uni brought me to Manchester. How do you find your lecture? You want to lay down? Okay. You help me? You can put your head in here if you want to lay down. It's good for you.
While he carries out this terrific act, he often gets things from the victims he calls trophies, such as mobile phones, watches, and ID cards. This goes out to say that he not only uses drugs, assaults, and records them, but he also steals from them. Eventually, when the victims finally regain consciousness, they will not be able to remember what had happened to them. He had at some time used his social media to contact his unknowing victims online, while some others, however, unwittingly accepted his friend requests on Facebook. Sinaga's earliest established offense occurred on New Year's Day, 2015. The man, his victim who was heterosexual, like the majority of Sinaga's victims, couldn't remember anything when he awoke the next day in his abuser's flat covered in vomit. Because of the fake concern Sinaga showed him, he, like many others, apologized for imposing on his host before leaving, but little did he know he had been raped twice. On this particular day, he goes hunting as usual, and brings an 18-year-old amateur rugby union player home. As he was carrying out his hideous act, the victim regained consciousness. When he found out he was in a strange place that seemed not to be his house, he fought Sinaga off, brutally beating him and rendering him unconscious. This simply explains why the detectives met him unconscious. You see, this victim was surely too lucky because the majority of his other victims had no memory, or even an idea whatsoever of what had happened to them. We believe that for this very victim, the universe decided it was time to put an end to this gruesome evil. But the victim didn't stop there. He made the smartest move ever by reporting this incident to the police. After seeing this, officers arrested Sinaga. In any case, he was taken to the interrogation room as officers wanted to hear the truth from Sinaga. While in there, he puts up a pity party show, posing as the victim. He constantly kept saying he didn't do anything, and that his victims were only enjoying acting out his sexual fantasy of playing dead during intercourse.
this 18-year-old boy is that I have had to tell him what you have done to him, because he didn't even know that this had been filmed.
Bullshit.
Who could have guessed that a man with an innocent-looking face like Sinaga, who is constantly crying and talking like the victim, could actually turn out to be the perpetrator of such an evil? Given his background and family's affluence, one would think Sinaga would do everything to protect that reputation, but that was not the case. Precisely on the 5th of June 2017, Reynhard Sinaga was charged with 1 count of rape and remanded in custody. At this time, investigators had already put all of their evidence together, from phone, memory card, and camera, to drugged drinks. Chilling with the officers was evidence worth 3.29 terabytes of extremely graphic material, equivalent to 250 DVDs or 300,000 photos, depicting sexual assaults lasting, in one case, for 8 hours. Thanks to these pieces of evidence, the investigation was smooth, fast, and real, and thanks to Sinaga's recording detectives had all they needed to put this evil serial rapist and monster behind bars. During his trial, Sinaga pleaded not guilty to all charges made against him, resulting in his victims having to endure related evidence in court, as well as the videos being shown to the jurors and others present at the trials. In his defense, he claims to have been playing sex games, with the other man playing dead to fulfill his fantasies, a word he kept on repeating over and over again. He claimed that the encounters were consensual, a claim found to be false as victims were heard snoring in the videos. This was indeed a slap on the face of those who had contributed to Sinaga's growth, physically and spiritually. Over time, Sinaga attended St. Chrysostom's Church, which is a liberal congregation of the Church of England. However, in the course of his trial, the church provided Sinaga with a character reference on how he was supposed to conduct himself. In any case, the presiding judge, Suzanne Goddard, remarked during the sentencing of the second trial that it is almost beyond belief that someone who could profess some Christian faith could at the same time have been committing such wicked and evil crimes. Just after his conviction, the St. Chrysostom's Church would distance itself from Sinaga because they couldn't stand the shame of associating with such an unrepentant monster, someone of whom the Crown prosecution tags as the most prolific rapist ever tried in a British court. However, the titles didn't stop there. He also received the title of the worst-known sex offender in the country's history. At the time his sentence was announced in January 2020, almost all of Sinaga's victims were known to have been heterosexual young men, with 3 exceptions. He, however, saw turning heterosexual men as a game of sport. In January 2015, one of his victims had argued with his girlfriend in the Factory nightclub near Sinaga's home, and with that very incident, he told a WhatsApp group, "Super Ray saves straight boys from their monstrous girlfriend." Nevertheless, his trial was one of a kind as he went through 4 different trials, making his case an exceptional one. The first trial, however, took place between the 1st of June and July 2018, which covered about 13 victims. In the end, a total of 48 victims were known out of at least 206 Sinaga is believed to have raped while they were unconscious. However, police have been unable to trace 70 of his victims. In the first 2 trials, he was given 88 concurrent life sentences with a minimum of 30-year term before being considered for parole. When it got to the Court of Appeal on the 11th of December 2020, it was increased to 40 years. Detectives subsequently set up a hotline with the expectation that dozens of new victims could come forward. Meanwhile, Sinaga was originally held at HMP Strangeways. He nevertheless was not cooperating with investigators. In April 2020, several months after his final trial, he was moved to HM Prison Wakefield. But on the 16th of January 2020, Sinaga's case was referred to the Court of Appeal once again for being too lenient. Jeffrey Cox said that Sinaga deserved a whole life order, which means he would never be eligible for parole. While a whole life order has never been imposed for crimes other than murder, Judge Suzanne Goddard considered this option when sentencing Sinaga and said that he should never be released. Nevertheless, Sinaga's earliest date of eligibility for a parole board hearing is 2060, when he will be about 77 years of age. Apparently, a day after Sinaga's sentencing, his father, Saibun Sinaga, expressed his opinion about the case. He said, "Got what he deserved, and we accept the verdict. His punishment fits his crimes. I don't want to discuss the case any further." Regretfully, Sinaga's mother, Norma Wadi Salayan, said that when she had visited him in the hospital in 2017, she wondered if Sinaga's final victim, the 18-year-old boy, had made up the story. She stated that she was not aware her son was gay. "We are a good Christian family who do not believe in homosexuality. He is my baby." Meanwhile, Duncan Craig, founder of Survivors Manchester, the charity supporting several of Sinaga's victims, saw this as an opportunity to start a national conservation to enlighten men out there on how to be open about sexual abuse. This goes out to all the abused men all over the world whose lives have been shattered due to this despicable evil. Speak up to get the justice you deserve.